At that first session that we had in January or February, we talked about pay equity and specifically what does it mean to thrive as an arts worker. I do want to drop the definition of pay equity into the space just because it is a term that will come up a lot. I will probably also accidentally say it when I mean pay transparency. I may have already done that once. But when we talk about pay equity, we mean compensating worker roles without discrimination. So the literal definition is balance, right? It's even, it's the same. When we talk about pay equity, though, what often comes up is the kind of other point about paying people well or righteously or fairly. And as I said, our first town hall was about that, i.e., what does it mean to thrive? And you can find some of those notes in that link, the notes from the field that Allie just dropped into the chat. But today we're here to talk about pay transparency. Oh, right, I have slides. Hold on a second. Like I said, clearly very good at this. Okay, so here is our definition of pay transparency. So the practice of sharing openly and explicitly information around compensation and or benefits. It's essentially an ongoing practice of communication. And it can manifest in lots of ways, right? So it can be eliminating secretive or outdated compensation practices or policies. It can be having a clear structure and strategy around compensation programs and plans. It can be having a clear and informed discussion about the value of labor and how we're thinking about labor. So Amy, I'd like to start off just generally, how do you think about this concept, this idea of pay transparency? How do you think about it?
I feel like the need or desire for pay transparency comes from a number of different places. I think it feels a little different when it's employee motivated than when it's organizationally motivated. Um, and that can bring into questions of how we do pay transparency. At its level, it seems very simple. We tell people what they pay or how much they're going to make. But there can be a lot of logistics and politics and office work that goes into making that happen. So, whether
I mean, you muted yourself in the middle of your sentence.
I sure did. Here we are with great technology. So I think whether an organization decides to commit to working to 100% pay transparency or some form of pay transparency, whether that's in their hiring practices or with their current employees, um, I think there's some layered thinking that has to go into that.
Great. And speaking of layered thinking, so you wear a lot of different hats in the kind of theater, film, production world. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about how or whether your thinking about pay transparency differs as a decision maker versus as an employee versus as a freelancer, or how these different roles impact how you approach thinking about pay transparency.
Sure. I think coming from the employee side of it, things, whether you're a freelancer or working directly for someone, it can just be very helpful to know what this job you're interviewing for is going to be paid. When people say things like compensation based on experience or inquire to find out more, you're creating additional barriers to application, and you're also indicating something about your company and how easy you want to make it for me to work there. Now, whether that may mean you want to leave negotiation open on the table, I appreciate the idea of negotiation. I also recognize that societally we have a number of norms that make it difficult for folks with certain bodies, certain gender expressions to successfully negotiate. And I often think about like, okay, what is your genuine commitment to your employees and their growth? As a leader of an organization, I'm aware if I'm running a new set or running a new production, that pay transparency can create negative feelings of comparison between people. Even if they don't have the same role, just knowing that, let's say, XYZ department is compensated at this level can sometimes make you feel like your work is being devalued. So I think when I approach pay transparency, which I deeply believe in when I am in the position of controlling the budget, I'm also really thoughtful about what compensation outside of dollar amounts looks like, and I want to be transparent about all levels of benefit and compensation when I'm working with new people.
Great. So you've already brought up a couple of things that I'm sure will come up later in terms of like what's scary about this, right? Or what is a benefit to us. I'm curious if, like, as we think about what this might look like, if there are particular moments or examples or case studies that come to mind, like as you think about the importance of or the potential consequences of pay transparency.
So I think what I think about when you ask that is there's a little bit of a difference when you're starting, let's say, a new play and you're going ground up with a new budget. It's very easy to be transparent if you're starting from the beginning. It's a lot less easy when you're in the middle and you decide to make that transition. A friend of mine was working for a tech company and they were moving to a pay grade system. As a consequence of moving that, they published the pay grades for everyone to know. And then he found out that his salary was significantly below what the pay grade for his title was supposed to be. So there was this moment of conflict, this moment of feeling devalued. His manager, who when he saw that was like, well, let's get you back the money you should have had, and also let's give you a raise. But he felt hurt by that experience, even when he did get the money back and ultimately ended up leaving that company.
And I'm thinking about, you said, so when you say it was the working pay grade, it was tied to the kind of the title or the level
Yes.
that the
Yeah.
person was working at. Oh,
Like
okay.
both title and years with the company. Like I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, there was like certain stocks tied to time in the company as well.
Gotcha. And I realized, or I remember when you and I were prepping, you also were talking about this idea of, like one of the potential pitfalls is that difference between I'm building from the beginning, right? And what am I building in from the beginning? And what am I trying to change midstream, right? And this idea that, yeah, things might be revealed and repair might need to happen in that moment, depending on what it is that's coming to the surface.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, like when you think about this philosophically, why is this important to you, like as an artist or as a leader? What's the goal? What does it accomplish?
I think in the arts in particular, there can be a lot of obfuscation around how money works in this industry, where it goes, who pays for what. And I noticed this really apparently during the pandemic when I feel like everyone, we were all at home, we were all binging everything we could on Netflix. And I was thinking about all the unemployed people at that artists at that time who didn't know when they were going to get back on set, who didn't know when they would be back on stage, and all the muggles were just sitting here being like, well, I loved binging this show. I'm like, that's great. Let's think about the people who made this possible for you, who made your time during this very difficult time in the world a little more enjoyable. Um, pay transparency to me is honoring the labor that people put into their work, the thoughtfulness and intention behind how we choose to do the work we do. And I also think it's important to know that for me, I appreciate it when a product I have consumed, whether it is art or not, is made by people who are well compensated. There's something about ethical consumption there, and that can happen at multiple levels. Um, I also just fundamentally believe that people who feel like they are valued by their workplace, who feel like they are being treated like humans and respected by their workplace, also produce better work.
Hmm. Well, I'm also thinking about the moment that I have at the end of a movie where I'm watching just like endless names of people who are involved with this project, and the kind of curtain getting pulled back on me being like, I would never have thought that there were 700 people or whatever working on this particular project, right? So in addition to like being transparent about what it is that we are compensating, this idea of lifting up how many people put their work into a thing, and us being able to know that they were also all compensated for their work.
Absolutely, yes.
Um, all right. So in a second, we're going to jump into a brainstorm. Amy, is there anything else that you want to say in terms of framing as you think about this concept of pay transparency?
I think if um, thinking about the parts of it that give some sense of resistance, whether that's like, oh, that makes me nervous, or oh, I don't know how to do that. Sometimes those things are the same, and sometimes they're not. And I encourage us to dig deep into why something might be difficult.
Great. So that going back to the group agreement of replacing judgment with curiosity, right? Or even just
Hmm.
employing curiosity all the way through this. How can we really question why we're engaging in something? Okay, so our first activity as a group is to do a kind of flash brainstorm about what pay transparency looks like. I'm going to stop this recording